Wastewater fund billed operating revenues reflect a deficit of 54.6%. This is due to the adjustments to the accounts that the board approved recently. Your operating expenses are 66.1% of budget, and your debt service is 50% of budget. Tourism reflects 27% of revenue collected and 37.7% of expenditures. Your transient occupancy taxes continue to decline, even with increased collection enforcement. The expenditures are below the 50% threshold. All departments continue to monitor revenues and expenditures, and best I can do December 31st.
Okay,
Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hatcher. We'll start at this end this time. Mr. Seeley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. The proffer fund, we actually adopted a budget of $797,000, and you're saying year-to-date is we've collected $66,301?
Yes, sir. That money is actually shown as a balance forward. It was proffer money collected in prior years and was the revenue sharing amount that we moved over for the VDOT project.
So that's separate from the proffer fund that's on the next page? I guess that's the expenditure side. Page 2. Right under fire grants proffer fund. Because it's the same amount, but then it's $5,750 year to date.
Yes, sir.
So that's, what's the difference?
The amount for the revenue sharing was done in January, so you're hitting a month lag here. The next report would show the $783,000 in both sides, expenditures and revenues.
So the $5,000 would be zero.
Now that's actual proper money that we transferred to the debt retirement fund for the YMCA, or towards the YMCA payment.
Okay, but I guess
it'd be easier if I could show you in my actual general ledgers how it's working.
We hadn't transferred the money to VDOT.
We hadn't transferred it as of December 31st.
So it doesn't show yet.
So it's still
But
in a different account.
we didn't raise all the money for the VDOT revenue sharing program in this fiscal year starting July 1. It was money that had been built up over a number of years. But the only money we had transferred was that $5,000 that went on for a YMCA payment.
so this money is technically spent, the proper money is spent
Yes,
on
sir.
road projects.
Yeah, and it
Yes,
is,
sir.
it is. It has been written since December 31st. So that's not sitting there any longer. VDOT has. That was the money we talked about earlier that we might get as much as $218,000 some odd dollars back.
Okay. I have one more. And I guess it's on page 9. And I understand that the utility fund is operating on the plus side for operations. So we currently, year-to-date, we've collected $1,226,000.
We've billed
We've
revenue.
billed
We've billed revenues through December 31st.
of $1.2 million.
Yes, sir.
So we've collected that.
No, we have billed it. I can't say that all of it is collected.
Oh, that was Beth's report.
Actually, even on Ms. Curran's report, because the utility fund is always on an accrual basis, everything is done on an accrual basis, I'd have to really do some digging to tell you how much of the cash.
Okay, but we have an operating expense of $846,886.
That's correct.
So that number's correct.
Yes, sir.
So these two numbers, I guess I just want to reconcile those two numbers. But the other thing that I was curious about that I don't see here is we have started an additional tax on Caroline Pines for maintenance.
We have not started. It has not been adopted by the board.
I thought we did that last year, January.
No, sir.
Because we were looking at what the actual number would be.
So where does the maintenance cost for the water breaks come from? Does it come out of the actual operating income?
Yes, sir.
And whatever that number is that we charge them, that's what they'll pay to fix those things.
So that doesn't get broken out separately in this?
No, sir.
Mr. Shebel should have that, right?
Okay.
It will be tracked separately once the amount is actually adopted, but I don't have anything to track at this point as far as revenues.
Well, yeah, but they're a utility district, which gets handled differently than, yeah, we did that.
Yeah,
Service
they're a
district.
Service district.
You adopted the service district, we just didn't adopt any fee.
Right.
And we had a hard time trying to base a fee last year because we didn't have any operating history. We are working on trying to propose some fee this year.
But the fee was to protect the county from their older pipes. So if their older pipes were breaking, they would fix those.
Right.
And that's what this fee is for, nothing
We
else.
talked about that.
Right. We just never set the number until this year.
And I guess I'm just making sure that we're not looking at accruals that are actually from that revenue side, which I thought we started in January of 13.
No, there's been no fee set, so there's been no revenue billed or collected as far as the service fee, no.
And the other thing is the operation isn't paying debt service.
It's paying part of it, not all of it.
Okay. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. Mr. Akers?
Questions, Ms. Hatcher?
Mr. Underwood?
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, when we did the water service to Caroline Pines and we borrowed X number of dollars, we came under budget on that project, correct?
I believe that was the case.
Right. I thought some of the residual funding went back into to help in the utilities area. Was that correct?
I think we did some other utility projects, but I thought we were supposed to give whatever was left back, because there was a discussion by the people from Caroline Pines
Right.
about the county having extra money,
Correct.
and I recall telling them that there was no such thing as extra money.
Right.
So we,
That's the question. Nobody talked about from time to time paying back. The question is, have we paid it back? So we used the
and
money.
that we'd have to check with staff. We were using it in other projects because we
Right,
were moving
so-
it around.
I just don't want to be hit twice for money that was used for other projects. If it was for this project, I want to make sure that then we're not going to come back and say, well, it costs X number of dollars for repairs. Therefore, since you are a service district, you have to
But the
hold your own.
The two were supposed to be separate, right? And you're right, because I think we used the extra money, and Mr. Shebel just came in, we could discuss this at a separate session,
Okay.
which is really what we need to
Okay.
do to make sure we get it. But I believe we used, instead of borrowing money again, we said, okay, we can use this
Correct.
money we have here,
Absolutely.
and didn't pay it back like we'd all said we wanted to do. But part of the whole plan was, we were expecting breaks and leaks because we didn't have anything to do with, or didn't know anything about their system.
Correct.
So somehow the service district was supposed to pay for that.
Correct. And I understand.
And again, another
Right,
part
so-
of that is the connection fee
Yes.
was only $2,800.
Correct.
It was
That's true.
significantly reduced from the 8,000 it should have been.
Well, that should have been. That's what we agreed to. So we agreed to
The
28.
8,000,
Well, but
the
that's what we-
8,000 is the normal
no,
fee.
no, no, no,
I'm just
no.
saying, we agreed to that.
No, you go buy a car on discount, you get whatever the discount is. You can't say, well, it costs 40,000, therefore no, we're talking about what the actual cost was. So that's what we agreed to. Now, we agreed to 5,000, that was on us to make that.
Right.
We made that deal.
And what we did was we went to the dealer and bought a car, and we got X price for it.
That's correct.
Then we had to go back to the dealer and say, oh, we need tires. And the tires are all of these brakes we're seeing now.
And
So we got a great deal on a car, but we didn't get tires.
Yeah, you got tires, it's just that maybe have calculated a little lower than anticipated, but you still can't come back and say, hey, because X, Y, and Z, the cost of cars have gone up. I'm going to charge you an additional price. I'm saying,
We're not doing that.
okay, as long as we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
I'm okay.
But we are saying you're going to pay for the brakes.
Right, I understand that.
Okay.
But I just want to make sure the money's not,
And we're gonna set up a
Okay.
special water
I'm okay with that.
and sewer thing that we need to have a work session to make sure we're all in the right
Absolutely, I'm okay with that.
And then keep in
Okay.
mind that the money that was borrowed cannot be used for repair and maintenance. It can only be used for capital projects. So if you were doing a major line replacement in Caroline
thank you.
Pines, it could be used, but if it's just to repair a leak, it cannot be used for that.
Thank you, Ms. Hatcher.
Sorry. Sorry.
Was that it, Mr. Underwood? we can move away from the dealership? Mr. Black?
Not at this time.
Mr. Taylor?
I don't have any.
All right, I had a couple, but I think you answered most of them during your overview. The 51% in meals tax that was in revenue was more than 50%, so kind of caught my attention. That's because of the McDonald's and the other things. We're getting a little bit extra. The number should be like 120% at the end of the year. Everybody got quiet. Everybody got quiet. I heard them over there being quiet. Okay, but we're expecting it to be a lot larger than what we budgeted just because of what's happened. All right, I think that was it. Thank you, Mrs. Hatcher. And now we'll see where we are relative to the... No, we're not going to do that anyhow. We're going to move to... yes, we're going to do the Davenport report, our 5-year plan. Kyle, it's Low?
Courtney Stand-in. You can call me Courtney Stand-in.
Well, see, I got Courtney already, and Rogers is easy. L-A-U-X.
Yeah, it's Laux,
Laos.
but however it rolls off the tongue, works.
I wanted to make sure I got it right. So
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Laos.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, nice to see everybody this evening. And Ms. Hatcher is handing you out a paper version of what I'll talk about here.
Newer than this? Is that the same one?
It should be the same thing you probably have in your package. I think we just-
Oh, but yours is in plastic.
Ours is bound in plastic.
Well, I'll take the bound one, please. Thank you. Ooh, we're so good. Oh, wait, we need Jeff. We missed him. Okay.
Yeah, and we have it electronically too. That
You connected? You want us to move the screen down? That'd be great.
so we're covered from multiple angles. Uh-oh. We're restarting. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, nice to see everybody this evening. This is why we brought paper copies too. Unplug something. And we have light. All right, I'll try not to click too hard for fear of... I think we got it. So again, third time's a charm. It's a pleasure to be here. You all know my colleague Courtney Rogers well. He apologizes he couldn't be here. But in his absence, we've got, this is sort of act one of two acts for me tonight. And what we want to do first, working closely with Mr. Cullion and his staff, knowing that the budget's going to be presented tonight in terms of Mr. Culler's proposed budget, was give you a sense, do something we've done in the past, a little bit bigger picture. You've heard from the treasurer, you heard from the finance director, kind of where you stand within this year financially. And so we want to make sure we take a step back as you're thinking about your next budget, the planning process, and give you some perspective, as well as to update the multi-year planning that we've done in the past. And so that's all contained within the next couple pages. In terms of an overview, we're going to do a couple different things, and we'll talk about a couple different things, and I'm happy to entertain questions as we go. First, from a big picture perspective, where are we revenue and expenditure-wise looking at over the last 5 years? It's one of those things where sometimes when you're trying to chart a course forward, as you are with the budget, it's good to see where you've been just recently, and so we'll do that. We want to look at assessed values and fund balances, two critical drivers of the county's financial health. We're going to look at debt capacity and debt affordability. You've been able to take advantage of the low rates of the last couple of years and get a number of things done. We'll take a look at what that looks like as that's been incorporated. One thing we want to broach with you this evening, not asking for you to approve it tonight, but we'd like to bring back is some financial policies. That's something in today's day and age that is going to be sort of more expected as you begin to as you grow and sort of mature as a local government per se. Those formal financial policies are something that we'd like to recommend that you think about adopting. And lastly, we'll take a look at the 5-year financial plan, something you've seen multiple years now, just sort of the next iteration of it based on the proposed budget that you'll hear about later. Just kind of see where that's trending going forward. And so this particular page is probably easier seen in paper than it is on the screen. But what it's showing is the general fund over the last 5 years, incorporating the 2013 actual sort of preliminary audit results. And what we see here in terms of a trend is a good one and one you should be commended for, because as you go to the bottom line, to sort of skip through a lot of the noise at the top of the page, what you see in the net change in fund balance, which at the end of the day is sort of your revenues versus your expenditures in any given year, is a improving and a positive trend the last 4 years. And that's been especially challenging, as you know, during those years when the economy was not doing well. It started to come back a little bit, and hopefully it's picking up some speed. But to be able to manage through the FY 10, 11, 12, and now into 13 fiscal year and have positive revenues over expenditures, that's important and something that you and your staff should be commended for. You'll notice in 2013 there's a little bit larger transfer out than in past years. That's cleaning up some of the utility side of things in terms of the money that the general fund has kind of helped the utility side out with. But in the same positive mode, you've seen 10, 11, and 12. So a little bit of a history in terms of the general fund there. We take a little bit closer look, 2013 budget versus actual. This is on page 3. On this page, we see a couple critical things. The first is you see total revenues coming in over the budget, just from a financial management standpoint. That's what you like to see. It's kind of what you would expect to see. You see expenditures coming in under the budget. Again, from a big picture financial management perspective, that's the kind of thing you like to see, being a little more conservative on the budget side, hopefully coming in above on revenues, below on expenditures. And lastly, again, having positive cash flow at the end of the year. Again, helping the general fund, or excuse me, the utility fund in terms of the transfers out, but continuing with that same theme, had a nice trend the last couple of years. So page 4 looks at your major revenue driver in the general fund, and that's your assessed values. And we've looked at a trend of the last 10 years here. And I think what you see is interesting. If you just look at the picture, you can see from 2004 all the way to 2010, able to kind of ride that housing boom up in terms of assessed values. That was great. We all know how that ended. And that ended basically in 2011, whereby with that last reassessment, we saw a little bit of a decline. Not as much as we've seen in other places. You were lucky by virtue of that. But you did see the decline in 2011 as a result of the overall financial crisis, the housing crisis. Now, as you get to 2012, I think this is important. because as you start to chart a course forward, I think what we're seeing, not just for you, but all of our clients, is you're not going to be able to rely on those big years of assessed value growth just based on housing prices going up into the future. And so what you're able to do is, by virtue of, I think, McKesson coming in 2012, you got a little bit of a pop back up. And as you think about going forward, one of the things we've been stressing to a lot of our clients is the importance of economic development to further help expand and broaden your tax base, because we just don't see the ability to sort of ride on years of 7-8% housing price growth into the future. So that'll be important going forward. On page 5, we look at another critical driver of your general fund financial health, and that's your reserves. If there's one data point that lenders and the credit markets, municipal analysts go look at to sort of gauge the financial health of a local government, this tends to be it. It's how many dollars in the general fund is in our unassigned or our sort of uncommitted fund balance. And what we see here is, again, a nice trend. It follows with that similar theme of having some solid recent results. And that basically is an increasing amount from 2009 until 2013. And the way that you typically look at your fund balance on a sort of relative basis is to compare that to your annual revenues. So you can sit back and you kind of say, all right, in 2013 we had about $11 million. That seems like a lot of money. But the way to view that in sort of perspective is to say, okay, how big is that $11 million relative to the total budget of the county? This county's got to do a lot of things. And so as we look at that, in 2013, that number was about 16.6%. And you can see that on sort of the far right bar on the right side graph. And that's a solid number, and it's been building up towards that number. And one of the things we'd like you to think about going forward is to put in place some formal financial policies that sort of formalize having at least a minimum amount of unassigned fund balance. We recommend to you 15%, which you'd be above right now, not by a lot, but by a little bit. And that's going to be a critical driver as you think about the future. It's important to be able to manage your cash flows throughout the year. You heard the treasurer earlier talking about the ebbs and flows, your cash flows during a fiscal year. Having this fund balance around means that you don't have to go out and borrow and do tax anticipation notes like you've had to do in the past. And so if you don't have to do that, that's basically saving an interest cost by virtue of having to go out and sort of get those payday loans. That's going to be a net benefit to you. Right, understood. You're not, but it's a similar sort of similar parallel in that if you don't have to do that from a financial management standpoint, you're going to be all the better. As lenders look at you, they're going to look at you much more positively if you've got some reserves in line with the policy. Page 6, something a lot of people like to see, kind of where do we stack up next to our neighbors. This is looking at the same sort of financial metric, unassigned fund balance versus revenues. And we just kind of picked a handful of folks right around in the region. And I think what we see here is you're right basically at the average of your regional county peers in terms of that fund balance level. Some folks below you, the Essexes, the Hanovers. I'd say as you look at like a Hanover, a Spotsylvania, Stafford, they're much larger. As you look at maybe a King William in the past has needed some cash flow help. The Louisas, the King George, the King and Queens, especially King George, which I know well, by virtue of their landfill, they've got some other things going on. But the point being here, you're right at sort of the average of some of your regional peers in terms of that unassigned fund balance versus revenues. So as we go on to page 7, shift gears a little bit, thinking about the utility side of things. Another sort of critical revenue driver for you that you just heard about from Ms. Hatcher. And I think what we see here is a lot of numbers. But if you go to the middle of the page, there's a line called operating revenues less operating expenditures. That's, I think, a point you were just making in the last report. And as you look at the last 4 fiscal years, you see a really nice trend there developing, whereby from an operating standpoint, the utility fund is being able to cover itself from the operations standpoint. And that was a goal that was set out a couple years ago, and you've gotten to that point. So that's good. The general fund is still helping out with the debt service side. No surprise there. That's been expected. But the general fund support's a little bit less in 13 than it was in 12. A lot of the future here is going to be dependent on what you have in terms of connection fees, availability fees. You've got a nice trend going, and the fact that you're operationally covering yourself, revenues versus expenditures, that's a good thing. Page 8 kind of takes those same numbers and reworks them a little bit. Looks at a debt service coverage ratio. This is important from a lending standpoint. And I think what you see here, as you go to there's a coverage line. It's in a blue bar. And that's basically the utility fund on its own. How many times is that covering debt service without any general fund help for the second? And what you see is a trend that's getting closer to 1. If you get that number to 1.0, that means that the utility fund is fully covering its operating expenditures and its debt service. That's a long-term goal. What we're doing for the time being is relying on some general fund help to kind of grease the wheels and keep things going. You see those dollars at the bottom of the page get you over 1 times, which is where you need to be from a utility system. Again, trying to be an enterprise fund, run it like a business, like to see that number over 1 times. A critical statistic as you think about the proposed budget here, this is the tax rate as it stands right now, real estate tax rate. I just wanted you to see regionally kind of where you stand, and I think the picture here is you're very competitive. You're right at the average. You're well below folks like the Staffords, the Spotsylvanias, Essex, Hanover, King William, below all those folks. A little above folks like a Westmoreland who has some water and some other things kind of helping them out. But you're right there within the average that you'd like to be regionally with your neighbors. So page 10 shifts gears again a little bit. We're going to talk about debt. And as we think about debt, we think about both debt capacity and debt affordability. Debt capacity is, as we say here, whether a locality is responsibly issuing debt. It's kind of looking at different ratios and different metrics to see where we fit in terms of our relative levels of debt. That's different than debt availability, which another word for that is debt affordability, which is simply the cash flow impact of making the debt service payments. And so we'll look at kind of both those things. Page 11 shows you your existing general government and school debt. So no utilities included within here. And what you see is you've been able to, in the last couple of years, by virtue of rates being low, the referendum, et cetera, getting a number of things done. Again, while rates are low, that's a good thing. As we look at your overall debt profile, because we have done those things, we've got some increases in 15 and 16 in terms of debt service, and then it begins to fall back off. You'll see that all impacts the cash flows in the multi-year financial plan. We highlighted here the 10-year payout ratio. That's that 48.9% number that shows up in 2023. That's basically a measure of how quickly you repay your debt. That's right at the level, probably the lowest level we'd really like to see it. You'd like to see it around 50%, which basically means you're paying off 50% of the principal piece of that within the next 10 years. So we're right there at that level, again, after having done a bunch of stuff the last couple of years. So it's not surprising that we're kind of right at the lower range where we'd like to be payout ratio-wise. Page 12 looks at debt versus assessed value. And this is one of the policies that we'd like to get you thinking about to be adopting. It's basically a measurement of your tax-supported debt relative to your total tax base. It's an affordability metric. And what you see here, we show on the left-hand side some comparatives, on the right-hand side sort of a trend, And again, by virtue of doing a variety of things the last couple of years, that ratio's gone up a little bit. We've made some investments at a time